Hi, Julianne. It's a pleasure to meet you today. So I understand the Australian government appointed you ambassador for gender equality just a few months ago. What was it that appealed to you about this role? And can you tell us, what does the position entail?
Thank you. Thank you so much for the opportunity to speak to you today. Yes, certainly. I was appointed quite auspiciously on International Women's Day this year on the 8th of March. I'm the fourth ambassador for, the previous three have been our ambassador for women and girls. Now we have, my title is the Ambassador for Gender Equality. So it's a much more inclusive title, I guess, these days, but essentially the role is to advocate for genuine gender equality. You know, it's been a very important part of you know, Australian foreign policy for many years now, that we consider the kind of gendered impacts, if you like, of many of our international challenges, be that security, foreign policy, trade policy issues. And I think the role in part was created to ensure that we, you know, we really think about, you know, what are the impacts, you know, on women and girls of many of these types of issues in the international arena. And so partly sort of an advocate, I suppose, if you like, for promoting, you know, gender norms internationally is a large part of the role.
We understand that DFAT sees gender equality and the empowerment of women and girls as key contributors to growth, development, and stability in the region. How has this been affected by COVID-19? And in a post-COVID world, what should governments and private sector investors do to ensure strong socio-economic outcomes for women and girls in the region?
Yeah, I think in Australia, I think we've long known, of course, that our prosperity, security and stability is really integrally linked with the region. Obviously, for several decades now, you know, our region has been, you know, many people refer to it as the engine room for global growth.
Right.
Thirds of the world's GDP, of course, you know, this region drives consumption, it attracts investment. In Australia, the government did release its gender equality and women's empowerment strategy back in 2016. And, you know, there I think we really clearly set out an economic proposition, and that you know, bridging the gender gap was not just the right thing to do, but it would also, of course, result in economic gains. Of course, this year we're confronted with new challenges in the Indo-Pacific region with COVID-19, as you rightly point out. And of course, we're already seeing, you know, the very kind of multifaceted nature of the crisis, you know, with health issues, social issues, economic issues across the region. And we know, we are seeing that this crisis, of course, will have a disproportionate effect on women and girls. Specifically, I think in the economic front, you know, we are seeing women overrepresented in sectors like retail and hospitality and tourism, all particularly hard hit by the pandemic. You know, when you look at what's happening with women's SMEs in the region, of course, there's such a significant part and role of, you know, that they play in employment in the region, but of course they're finding it extremely difficult to operate right now. I've seen a figure recently from the Goldman & Sachs Foundation from last year, in which they suggested that globally, you know, I think there's something in the order of $1.5 trillion credit gap for women, small and medium enterprises. And yet we know the flip side of that is, I guess we know that women tend to deliver very solid returns in their businesses. They're a far less risky proposition in many senses. So, you know, I kind of imagine, you know, what economic growth could be unleashed if we ensured, of course, that there was financing for women's businesses, particularly in our region. We can ensure, of course, that governments and larger financial institutions, including the likes of the World Bank and, of course, the ADB, the Asian Development Bank, are applying a gender lens and that they're targeting women's small and medium enterprise at a time when they really need that support. Of course, we can also work with private capital providers to ensure that, you know, women's SMEs are supported. And you know that we actually work with a partner of AVPN, which is Investing in Women. And I know that they have been responding very quickly to investment partners to ensure that they can continue providing finance to women's SMEs right now when they particularly need it. So obviously there's a vital role for women to play right now in decision-making, in economic decision-making around COVID-19. And I guess we're hoping, you know, as economies around the world and in our region in particular begin to reopen, you know, there'll be opportunities, I think, to address some of these gender inequalities.
We completely agree with this same approach of the support of women and girls, as well as, you know, as you mentioned, the collective action towards, you know, addressing the issues that the COVID-19 pandemic has brought up. We talked about, you mentioned the partnership with Investing in Women. Besides that, we have also reflected other partnerships through our new gender platform and our COVID-19 page, both of which we hope will effectively drive capital across the region to these important issue areas that are affecting women and girls. So at AVPN, our core belief is that the power of the network fully comes into action when each member, staff, and partner is an ambassador of the association, championing the value of collaboration and driving impact as part of the larger community. Becoming part of our network is more than just receiving a membership service. It is actually used to drive a movement and champion the causes that matter the most to you. So what cause matters most to you, and how are you hoping to drive this forward with the AVPN network?
I mean, I think on your first point, of course, about the power of networks, I think, you know, we, you know, and I personally absolutely agree that these days, you know, we live in a much more globalized world, and we see, of course, the challenges, including those that we're currently facing with this pandemic, are much more complex and much more multifaceted than we have seen in the past. And so we really do need solid networks to help us tackle, you know, some of the challenges that are ahead of us. I know over the years that, you know, the Australian Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade has gained a lot of value, great value from being an AVPN member. It, of course, allows us to be connected to a network really committed to what I think is building a vibrant, you know, high impact philanthropy and social investment community in Asia. So that really is something that we see as core to, you know, the collaboration that we have with AVPN. I saw an interview with you actually on a channel on YouTube, which, you know, said, you know, it's really important that we not just do impact investing, but investing with impact. And I think certainly that is something, you know, that the Australian government is very committed to as well. And I think, you know, now, of course, when we're facing a situation with the current economic downturn as a result of the pandemic, you know, we really need to be looking for, I guess, new and different forms of collaboration. So, you know, we really want to encourage governments and private sector to really work closely together to try and unlock some more of that, you know, capital to try and support, you know, women entrepreneurs. And I think this is where we see, you know, forums like this as really invaluable in terms of allowing people to make sure that, you know, they make these types of connections. So yes, from my perspective, I'm certainly wishing you all the best for this conference, and of course, you know, hearing the outcomes as well.
Thank you, Julianne. I couldn't agree more. I think, you know, for so many years we have talked about, you know, giving women an equal playing field, and you know, we are still kind of working hard to get there. And I'm hoping that, you know, this pandemic and you know, sort of the recovery and resilience efforts that we are all putting in together to recover from that will be a turning point in terms of, you know, having more finance and more capital available for for women-led businesses and for driving empowerment of women and girls across the region. Thank you so much for your support and for the support of investing in women. It takes a village, and in this case, it probably takes many villages to achieve what we want to achieve. Thank you very much.
Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this session on how will COVID-19 affect the outlook for impact investments in Southeast Asia. My name is Komal Sahu, Chief of Sustainable Finance at AVPN. I'm delighted to have you join us today. You'll be excited to know we have full house on a small room on Adobe Connect, and we have further backup on Zoom where some of my colleagues are also joining in. For those of you who do not know about AVPN, we're a network of funders and resource providers with over 600 members across 32 markets. Our mandate is to move more capital towards impact in Asia by providing social investors like yourself opportunities to connect, learn, and lead. We're also sharing highlights of our day live on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Twitter, so don't forget to share your experience with us using hashtag AVPN2020. We hope you enjoyed the pre-session video with AVPN CEO and Chair, Naina Sabharwal Batra, and DFAT's Ambassador for Gender Equality, Julianne Guerra. The themes discussed in the interview sets the tone for our time together. In today's session, we will first have a fireside debate between an LP and GP about impact investing in Southeast Asia, before hearing from two fund managers who will be informing us about the innovative impact work that they're doing in the region. Before we begin, everyone please take note. AVPN is an industry platform to connect and share best practices, experiences, and knowledge within the network for the development of an impactful social investment community. As part of AVPN, members sharing their work and experience in mobilizing capital for impact, this session will include information about AVPN members' investee organizations, funds, and products. Certain information included in this session may be for accredited investors only, on the expectation that the delegates joining this session should be accredited investors or who represent accredited investors only. Information shared by the speakers in this session is provided by third parties and does not represent the views of AVPN on any matter. AVPN does not warrant the accuracy, completeness, or usefulness of this information and is not liable or responsible for reliance anyone may place on such information. Delegates should consume this information at their own risk. AVPN deserves the right to edit, cut down, adapt the content and materials to align with the stated agenda or purpose of this session. Any information or materials provided are only for information and knowledge sharing and does not in any way constitute tax, legal, financial, or investment advice, nor do they constitute offers, solicitations, or recommendations for any investment activity. That said, a few housekeeping announcements as well. I will be ensuring that your learning experience with us is a meaningful one. So if you're finding the webcam is facing a lag, please pause the video. If you're facing any other technical challenges, such as difficulties in hearing the speakers, please do not hesitate to reach out to us through the Q&A pod. We'll be commencing shortly, but before we kick off our sessions, my guidance to you is please use the Adobe Connect app version and not the browser version. If you get disconnected or have a bad connection, log out of the app and then log back in. Or if you're using the browser, refresh the page. Ensure that you're not running other programs in the background. Hopefully that should improve the situation. Please note that this program is recorded and you will be able to access the recording from conference.avpn.asia. In this session, each fund manager will have 10 minutes for Q&A directly after their presentation. Please do type your questions in the Q&A pod and we will convey these questions to your speakers. You will only see the questions that you have personally submitted, but know that the team is working behind the scenes to ensure that we answer as many of them as possible. If you take a look at the bottom of the screen, we also provided you with reading materials that you can download or refer to. Finally, continue chatting with your speakers and fellow delegates in this session. Please make sure you're using the AVPN connector. The link is found in the resource section. And now I'll introduce you to our moderator and panelists for this session. Our moderator is Genevieve Hank. Genevieve is co-founder of Anthem Asia, an independent, women-led investment group focused on investing in small and medium-sized enterprises in Myanmar. Previously, Genevieve was a senior member of CLSA Capital Partners, Pan-Asian private equity firm for 13 years. Thank you for joining us today, Genevieve. Genevieve will be joined by Valitsa Rizvanoli, investment manager at Triple Jump, Venkat Narayan, partner at Avishkar Capital, Shuying Tang, partner at Patama Capital, and Tom Schmitzer, co-founder of Moonshot Ventures. Over to you, Genevieve.
Hello, thank you very much to Kamal, to the AVPN team for this great opportunity to moderate this session. 100 people in the room, that's really exciting, and it shows that there's a lot of interest in this segment. So it really doesn't, I'm only here as a moderator. I'm not the person that you're here to actually listen to. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to now turn over to AVPN because they are going to conduct a poll. So you're going to see the poll up. I hope all of you see it. It would be great if you could tell us the capacity that you're joining us today. Okay, I'm just going to check how many more minutes should we let the poll carry on, AVPN. Okay, I think we have got most of the people. So we've just closed the poll. And if I look at the poll results, I hope all of you can see it like me. It seems like we've got, wow, a whopping 60% are others. Okay, that's very interesting. I kind of expected to have a lot in terms of family offices, fund managers, but we've got a lot of people who are here today and very keen to listen to what our speakers have to say. So with that, what I'm going to do now is I am going to introduce our speakers who are Ralitza and Venkat. So let me start with Ralitza. So Ralitza is an investment manager with Triple Jump, which is a Dutch asset management company, and they're focused on financial inclusion, SME finance, affordable housing, and clean energy. She's part of the Fund of Funds team managing DGGF, the Dutch Good Growth Fund, which was launched by the Dutch government 6 years ago, aimed at the missing middle finance in emerging countries. And her focus is very much on job creation and outreach to women and young entrepreneurs. She oversees DGGF's portfolio in East Africa and South Asia, and is an active on the LPAC committees for several VC funds in South and Southeast Asia, and Avishkar is one of her portfolio funds. Secondly, we have Venkat Narayan. Venkat is a partner with Avishkar Capital, and he co-manages the Avishkar Frontier Fund. He joined Avishkar in 2013 to take the Avishkar investment thesis broader into South and Southeast Asia through raising and managing the Avishkar Frontier Fund. In addition to this, he's actively engaged in the startup ecosystem in both India and Indonesia. Prior to joining Avishkar, Venkat has executed multiple M&A transactions, project finance, and special situation deals as a senior investment banker across a range of buy and sell side transactions. So I think what you're going to have is a very interesting little session where you have both Venkat and Ralitza with lots of experience. And so with that, I am going to proceed with asking these two GP and LP certain questions. So we'll start with Venkat, yeah? So Venkat, Avishkar, so tell me, you've been spending time doing deals in India, and I think your experience there is quite strong. So why has there been a shift or an interest now to focus on Southeast Asia with the Avishkar Frontier Group?
Thanks. Thanks for the introduction, and thanks to AVPN for giving us an opportunity to participate in this very important topic of impact investing and gender lens and COVID as well. Avishkar actually did not divert its attention to Southeast Asia. It's just that when around 5-7 years ago, when some of our investors reached out and said that we like the work that Avishkar is doing in India to build an impact ecosystem, to build the SME investing system. And they said, why can't you take it out? Because there are not too many people doing it in other parts of Asia. And we began with our neighboring countries. And as you know, it requires large populations, so that by definition, then chances are in the emerging markets, you'll have a large low-income population. And that's what is required for impact investing to work. And that's how we chose with Indonesia, Bangladesh, and if we had raised a little bit more money, then we would have gone to a few more countries which are more populous and our neighbors as well. So in that sense, we haven't changed our focus on India. This is in addition to whatever we're doing in India.
Okay, well, thank you very much. So impact investing, large populations. So Ralitza, I know you cover emerging countries, financial inclusion, impact investing. So tell us, what actually attracted DGGF to Avishkar?
Sure. Thank you, Genevieve, and welcome everybody, and thank you to the conference organizers for this opportunity. Well, as you said in your introduction, the DGGF mandate was set out to have a very strong impact focus in emerging markets. And part of that is also taking, in a way, the risk to support new initiatives. I think if you want innovation, you cannot walk on the established road, and you need to try out new things. So part of our mission is actually to support first-time fund managers or managers who are experienced and established, just as Avishkar was, but are trying to export their business model into new, more underserved markets. And so in Avishkar's case, this is exactly what we saw. We saw a strong impact investor with an impressive footprint in India that were trying to basically export their vision to the neighboring countries. So this was the attraction to support their fund. And actually they're trying to export that also to East Africa. So we're now currently looking into maybe collaborating with them there. So that's a bit the thesis. What has worked in some markets, and how can we expand that to other markets?
Okay, that's great. So, you talked about the challenges and having worked in East Africa. I mean, what are some of the challenges you see in terms of impact investing in other markets? And what are the commonalities and the differences between the East Africa and Southeast Asia?
I mean, I guess working in emerging markets is fraught with challenges. From political risks to regulatory challenges to red tape, just to name a few. I think, especially now with COVID, we see these challenges even more exacerbated, I would say. In terms of, if to go back to working with first-time fund managers, I think our mission has always been to support these teams, and I think running a fund is difficult enough. I think as you both, Venkat and Genevieve, know, but doing that with a first-time team in new market is even more. So our role as investors is to support our fund managers by being basically an LP they can rely on for sparring purposes, or as a thought leader, by strengthening ESG functions, by providing technical assistance to strengthen core fund management functions, to enable fund managers basically to have strong enough institutional fundamentals that would enable them then to meet the challenges that emerging markets present when you invest.
Okay, that's a lot. So Venkat, now over to you. You've got your LP who's told us that they're doing a lot to support you. So tell me some of the stuff that you guys have been going through. I think, COVID-19 has been a big, big challenge across everywhere. And in Southeast Asia, I'm sure we're all facing the same challenges, but there might be some differences. So tell us, what are the challenges you've been facing in COVID-19, and how have your LPs been supporting you in this way?
Thanks. I think what we have been doing is COVID has impacted operations in different parts of the region differently. Lockdown conditions have been very extreme, you can say, in some parts of, say, India, versus parts like Vietnam or Thailand had a much better approach and had a lot less restrictions on economic activity and life in general. But from an investing point of view, the one thing that has been common everywhere is been the drying up of liquidity, because people don't know the demand and how the economic activity will pick up. So one thing which we have been speaking to LPs like DGGF has been to say that since the fundraising market in this part of the world, especially the risk capital, is going to be limited due to travel restrictions as well, then why can't we, the existing investors, step in and say that, can we do something more? Even though the fund has been closed some 3 or 4 years ago, so the LPs are considering that. That's one way they are helping us. The second way which is there is to understand how the you will go through situations like some enterprises will shut down. So how do you do it responsibly? So these are the couple of ways we have been talking to our LPs and trying to learn from experiences in different parts of the world, as well as different funds in which the LPs have been investing in.
Okay, that's great. I mean, I know that, you know, it's very challenging. We've also got a couple of companies that we work with, and everyone's struggling with the same thing. You've got liquidity crisis. Where are you going to get the cash to pay your staff? That's the most important thing. And then you've got to make sure that you can collect from your clients who are all telling you that they've got their own problems. So that's a big, big challenge. I mean, in terms of the investment approach, how difficult is it? I mean, are you still in investing phase? Are you still
No,
in the investing phase? Okay.
The current fund has been fully deployed. So in terms of the portfolio, but yes, we still have some small amount of liquidity which we're using to support our existing companies.
Right.
So we're not really looking at new companies at this point.
In that case, since you're looking at very much more of a portfolio monitoring, I would say, could you give us a few real, you know, war stories that you've had to deal with in the last couple of months? It would be great. I think people would be interested to hear some war stories as to how you've actually had to get down to the 30 feet to actually help your portfolio companies. Can you share a couple of stories with us?
Sure. One of our portfolio company, say Fibilio, which is which is an omni-channel furnishing and furniture play in Indonesia. We had supported them. We were the lead investor in Series B, and we knew that they were running out of runway in in February, March or so, and we had come close to finding a lead investor as well for Series C. And but the Series C actually we closed only in May of this year, so that's a couple of weeks ago. So to a certain extent, you can say that in spite of having got a term sheet only in March, all the investors as well as support members, we got around together and negotiated a transaction as well as completed the documentation completely virtually. So that's one way in which I think we had to do different things in different ways, but we ultimately got it done. At the same time, we also said that in addition to supporting the fundraise, we said we will also be able to participate in a small way because our major fund was deployed. Then parallelly, we had to get our investment process as well completely aligned and do it digitally. So to a certain extent, doing this entire investment process digitally without having meetings and concluding a $9 million investment in this round is one good way, I think, which we were able to support that company.
That's great. Thank you very much. Well, you've been dealing with lots of companies, a lot of funds. So tell us, how has it been for you working with your portfolio funds to deal with both, monitoring existing companies as well as investing? So what are your experiences working with them? What have they told you and shared with you?
I think the one trend that we see emerging that really impacts how fund managers are able to meet the COVID challenge is where they are in their investment life cycle. Rather than regional differences, because I do think COVID has affected us globally and maybe in different ways, but what is really the differentiating factor here is whether a fund is in the beginning or at the end of their investment period, and essentially how much liquidity they have to support their investees. So we see especially the funds that are at the end of their investment period or post are struggling the most because they actually have very limited means to support the companies. And we know in crisis times, cash is king. So even if you can support your companies in small ways to bridge liquidity needs for a short amount of time, that already means a lot and can make a big difference. So these are the fund managers that we prioritize in our portfolio. Whereas investments that we have recently closed and they have a long runway, they first of all have liquidity to support existing companies, and second have the runway, I guess, to adjust their investment strategy if needed in a post-COVID world.
Okay, thank you very much. We actually have only a few more minutes before we have to jump to the next session, next fireside presentation. I just wanted to get quick comments from you. So Venkat, this is for you. Avishka Frontier Fund, I understand, is all male. So tell me, the next session is talking about gender lens investing. I'd really like to have a very quick comment from you as to how Avishka actually deals with women entrepreneurs, how to get these. Do you have any sort of approach for investing in women?
Yes, I think it is a fact that our entire investment team is male, but to a certain extent it is because when we are traveling to frontier markets, the travel conditions as well as the uncertainties in the whole process are rather new, and it requires a little bit more, if you will, the pool of fund managers who are women who are interested in doing this kind of work is also not very big. And so to a certain extent, what we are doing is first developing the local talent who happen to be male first, and then over a period of time when we have larger operations, we will have women as well.
Okay, you know what, thank you very much. We've run out of time. I've got two fabulous speakers, both Venkat and Lalit, so I think we could hear and learn a lot more. But we are going to have to switch over to the next session. So thank you very much. And Venkat, I would love to hear what Shireen has to say about it, because she's talking specifically about women funds as well as Tom. So thank you, Lalit. Thank you, Venkat.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Okay. So now we're going to switch to the second section, which is on gender lens investing. And I am going to start by presenting. Now here's where I'm going to have a bit of problem pronouncing your name, Tom Schmitzy. I hope I got that right. But before we do that, let me just take a quick poll. So the poll that we're going to run now is called, what kind of products would you use to deploy capital in the region? So the poll is up. I hope you all are seeing it. And if you could vote, I'll give a little bit more time. So it seems there's nobody else left. All right. I am now going to, as we speak. I see more people voting. Right, I'm going to count down to 3, 2, 1. Sorry, that's close. Okay, results. I hope these results are being broadcast to all of you, and it sounds like just is grants, followed by, well, we've got a tie between equity and technical support. So thank you very much, everybody, for taking part in that poll. I am now going to introduce you to our speaker, Tom Schmitzy, co-founder of Moonshot Ventures. Now, Moonshot Ventures is an impact investing firm which invests in disruptive ventures that address some of the world's most pressing problems. They operate in Indonesia and Southeast Asia. Oops. Okay, and they manage a seed fund and are also an incubator for themed micro funds. Tom is passionate about entrepreneurship, particularly when he's leading to a social environment impact. And his career has centered on supporting, building, and investing in purpose-driven ventures. So, over to you, Tom.
Great, thank you, and hello everyone. As you just heard, my name is Tom Schmitzy, and I'm the co-founder of Moonshot Ventures. I'm here today to introduce the launch of the Indonesia Women Empowerment Fund, or IWEF. The goal of IWEF is to promote women's economic empowerment in Indonesia through investing in disruptive commercial innovations which are led by women entrepreneurs. IWEF is being launched as a cross-sector partnership between 3 principal actors in the impact investing ecosystem: Moonshot Ventures, YCAP Ventures, and the Australian government's Investing in Women program. From the left, Moonshot Ventures manages and incubates theme-focused impact funds. Each fund focuses on specific development challenges, which we manage in partnership with domain specialists, in this case, YCAP Ventures. All the funds seek transformational solutions to the issues they address through investing in startups with disruptive innovations. The Moonshot team is composed of seasoned investors, founders, and tech operators with deep experience in the region. YCAP Ventures is the impact investing arm of the YCAP Social Enterprise Group, which has been a leading advocate of women economic empowerment in Indonesia, including through funding some 150,000 women entrepreneurs in Indonesia to date. IWEF is also pleased to be partnering with Investing in Women, which has supported gender-focused funds and intermediaries across Southeast Asia. Investing in Women is an anchor sponsor and investor to IWEF and is providing catalytic capital to the fund. IWEF has a 3-pronged investment focus, with the first 2 acting as conduits to address the third. The first prong is investing in startups with innovations that can leapfrog traditional barriers that impede women's economic participation. And the strong case for investing in tech in Indonesia is well known, with a young and increasingly digitally enabled mass market with huge potential for growth. The second prong is investing in talented women entrepreneurs. As studies suggest, women entrepreneurs are often overlooked by male-dominated investment teams. This is a missed opportunity which otherwise can lead to greater investment outcomes. These first 2 then are the conduits and commercial opportunities with which to tackle the impact problem of women's economic empowerment in Indonesia. The impact problem that IWEF will address is that women in Indonesia are economically underengaged, with detrimental effects to their welfare and livelihoods, as well as representing a huge lost economic opportunity for the country to the tune of some $135 billion by 2025. As you can see on the left, Indonesia trails the region in terms of women's economic participation, and unlike other countries in the region, has been relatively stagnant across many metrics for women's empowerment over the last decade. As you can see on the right, women need greater access to quality full-time work, which is better paid and without the traditional burdens that hinder them from joining the workforce. But finding solutions requires us to better understand the women in question. For one thing, the 90 million women that comprise Indonesia's potential women workforce paint a very varied picture and face very different challenges. For instance, looking at the bottom right is the self-employed segment. Micro and small enterprises are the backbone of the Indonesian economy, and just over half of them are led by women. However, the productivity of these women-run businesses typically lags behind similar businesses run by men. But when women-run businesses go digital, things change dramatically. For instance, in Indonesia, while only 15% of total MSME offline retail revenue is generated by women enterprises, this jumps to 35% in online retail. Many women's MSMEs would greatly benefit from the tools and channels that the digital economy can offer. Indeed, we believe that digital solutions can overcome many barriers for women in Indonesia, and here are some examples of women-led tech startups doing just that. We see here the three segments again for the potential female workforce. For each segment, we've highlighted two tech startups that are transforming lives, which we're really excited about. One is an inspiring global example, which you may have heard of, and one is a local example from our own potential pipeline of around 30 women-led tech startups, which we hope will one day grow into a global example for others. So for instance, on the top right, let's take the case of Grab, a favorite of this region. What may be surprising is how the platform has helped over 9 million people earn a living as micro-entrepreneurs, including 5 million women. And for a local example from Indonesia, on the left-hand side, we're excited about Care, which through its online platform helps reduce barriers for employed women by connecting childcare providers with working mothers. It's simultaneously providing employment opportunities and reducing barriers to work. But Moonshot Ventures and IWEF is also seeking to overcome barriers to impact investing and help grow the sector. We're developing new strategies and approaches, which we're keen to share with other impact investors. We've highlighted here just 3 of these. Very briefly, with impact incentive structures for the investment team, we're seeking to bring accountability to the impact we achieve and thereby confidence from our investors. We're also employing blended finance so as to attract more and more private investors and so grow the total quantum of capital available to achieve impact and financial returns. And we're also seeking to maximize the efficacy of the dollars we deploy by only investing in solutions that promise to be both disruptive and transformational. And finally, a few words about the IWEF team. This really is a joint team effort from YCAP Ventures and Moonshot. On the right-hand side, you see that Stella Tambunan joins IWEF from YCAP, where she heads up YCAP Ventures and brings her experience in development finance. From Moonshot's side is Susie Lee, who brings her experience as an impact investor and also as a founder of Erudify, a fintech startup providing student loans to predominantly women borrowers. Both Susie and Stella are from Indonesia. And finally, we have Kayleen Alvarez, who, as a senior advisor, brings expertise in GLI and SME finance, including as the founder of Biduk, which provides loans to women-led businesses in Indonesia. And Stella, Kayleen, and Susie will, of course, be supported by the wider YCAP and Moonshot teams. So this brings us to the end of this overview. We hope you have a better understanding of what IWEF is about, and I look forward to any questions now, or please do email us at a later time. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tom. That was really interesting. I didn't know that much. Now I know a lot more about Indonesia's women entrepreneurs. So I'm going to ask you a couple of questions. One of the things that when I was listening to you, which I was not clear about, was this idea of a blended investment vehicle. So, could you explain a bit more, because that's something which is less common, and so it'd be great if you could elaborate
absolutely.
on it.
The goal is to attract a greater quantum of capital from impact-focused investors, as well as from return-focused investors, which we can then deploy for wider impact and financial returns. So we blend the capital from the two sources, with impact-focused capital absorbing the risk from the return-focused capital. Everyone gets what they want, more impact, while still achieving returns. We blend the capital at the fund level and not at the deal-by-deal level, which helps better align incentives and spreads risk-absorbing capital across the entire portfolio. We're also looking at the novel strategy of focusing return-seeking capital on the follow-on investments, which is where the greatest returns are usually achieved in a fund. So we're really excited about that.
Okay, well, that sounds very interesting. So effectively, you're allowing the company to still get the same benefits, but at the fund level, you're trying to incentivize by getting what? You're trying to attract the investors by having what they call, I think it's called catalytic first-class capital. Is that how it works? So if you blend the two, then the investors are going to get certain returns, and the company still gets the best deal that they can. And you get impact. Okay, I think I understand. So then it leads on to the next question I have, which is, you also mentioned in the same slide, you said about impact incentive structures. So again, that's something new to me, and I'm sure a few others as well. Could you elaborate?
Sure, it's something we're very excited to include in the features of the fund. Impact incentive structures are a novel way to align the reward structures of the investment team with the impact goals of the fund. In brief, the carry or the share of the profits from the fund that go to the investment team are dependent on the impact achieved. In this respect, it's similar to pay for success models that you may have heard of. In practice, a portion of the carry is set against a set of impact metrics to be achieved at the fund level. Basically, if we don't hit the impact metrics on a sliding scale, carry will be returned to the investors. We're also looking at impact incentives for the entrepreneurs to further align incentives and avoid mission drift. This could entail, for instance, self-liquidating equity structures, so that if the entrepreneurs hit the impact goals, they get a portion of the equity back. And just to be very clear, we invest in startups where the impact goal is embedded in the product or service. So when we talk about hitting impact goals, we are also talking about hitting business goals.
Okay, that's fantastic. So effectively, everyone's aligned. If you get your job done, you're going to get incentivized and get the returns. Thank you very much. Okay, we've got some great questions from the audience. And so I'm just going to throw the first one at you, Tom. It's a very good question, because I was about to ask the same thing. Why are women entrepreneurs able to offer faster exits? I think you had a slide earlier. And the second part to that is that true for non-tech industries as well?
Sure. So we focus on tech, so I can really only best speak to that. And that's where, of course, you get the faster exits anyway, when it comes to the kind of high impact, high growth investing that we do. Studies show that about 10%, that there's a increase in speed of around 10% in the duration of exits, maybe up to a year or a little bit less, which is significant when it comes to the metrics of a fund performance. As to what the causality of that is, I think a lot of the jury is still out on that, and it's hard to draw causal effects. But certainly, studies do show that a more balanced approach in the management team of any business leads to greater productivity and greater business outcomes. And this is probably where the faster exits are being driven by, given that basically a company has to reach a certain size, a certain level of performance before an exit can be envisioned. And so that's probably what's driving the performance. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. We've got another question, which is about the size of the market. And I think, one of the things we had was, just 1 minute, what is it, a technical snafu here? So you talked about the size of the market. It's interesting because Indonesia seems quite large. It's the slide where you had all the little bubbles. And it seemed like Indonesia was quite large, and yet you had other countries which were quite small. We had Vietnam, I think we had Myanmar. I mean, can you elaborate a bit about that? Why is it, what is it about social investments, and do the social investors look for in these smaller countries, despite the size of the market? Is that
Sure.
clear?
We focus on Indonesia, and I know Shu Yin coming up next has a more of a regional approach. I'm sure she'll be able to provide some interesting insights on the regional perspective. We chose to invest in Indonesia as far as the opportunity being that much greater to be absorb the catalytic capital and the deploy. We believe it's a great opportunity. And whilst other countries like Vietnam are doing much better on metrics of improving empowerment for women, Indonesia still faces many barriers. And so for us, it was a balance of both the opportunity to have outsized impact through the investments we want to make, whilst at the same time being able to take advantage of a tech market that is growing and buoyant and has still huge potential. And so we can balance both the impact goal as well as the commercial returns that are necessitated by the mix of investors that we're appealing to.
Okay. Now I want to turn back to what you guys do, which is very much the seed stage. So when you're doing the seed stage investments, you know, there's a lot of hand holding that needs to be done. So we're talking about women entrepreneurs, you know, we're talking about micro SMEs. I mean, how much work do you actually have to help them, and in terms of the level of support you have to give them?
Sure, that's a very good point. And just to clarify, we ourselves are not investing directly into the micro entrepreneurs. Rather, we're investing in the tools and channels which will empower those entrepreneurs. And it's those tools, those picks and shovels, which will potentially transform the opportunities for the micro women entrepreneurs. And at the same time provide that explosive growth that a early stage venture capital start investor requires, or as its investors require. So we're one level above, but with a small pool of capital, we can achieve outsized returns both for impact and for financial return. But with regards to technical assistance, those entrepreneurs that we do invest in, the innovation-driven entrepreneurs, they still need help. And we have a budget for technical assistance set aside to help with all our portfolio companies, such as with investment readiness. We also have partnerships with specialist providers, such as with Tech Building, and we are partnered with the RISE platform that can provide reimbursable grants for technical assistance to our entrepreneurs. So we feel that we can provide a lot more than just the investment capital, but also support with technical assistance.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Tom. That's been very, very interesting, and there are lots more questions. I wish we had time, but we're going to have to now move on to Shu Yin. So I'm going to now switch over to Shu Yin. Okay, so now we've got Shu Yin up, I believe. So Shu Yin Tang is a partner at Patama Capital, which is a venture capital firm that targets risk commensurate returns for its investors, while also seeking to unlock better economic opportunities for Asia's low-income communities. Shu Yin is responsible for Patama's investing activities in the Mekong region, and she has led investments in education, fintech, employee benefits, and healthcare companies. She spearheads Patama's gender lens investing efforts, including managing one of the first gender lens investing funds in Southeast Asia, the Investing in Women Fund. So Shu Yin, it's all yours.
Thanks a lot, Genevieve. Good afternoon, good morning, everyone. I'm here to share our evolving story at the Beacon Fund, but I think that really only makes sense as part of our larger 10-year journey at Patama Capital. So as many of you on this call may know, Panama is an impact investment firm managing a number of funds in South and Southeast Asia. And I have to admit, we started off maybe more as accidental GLI investors. We were investing in a lot of microfinance companies, companies which served a lot of women. But it was really only through our partnership with Investing in Women and our experience managing the Investing in Women Fund, which, as was mentioned, is one of the first GLI vehicles in Southeast Asia, that we became more strategic about it and shifted towards a more intentional approach. This journey really helped us see clearly that without applying a gender lens, we'd be missing opportunities to capture value, both financial as well as social. And just as importantly, it gave us the space and the support that we needed to develop very practical tools to conduct gender lens investing. I know sometimes that GLI can seem a little theoretical, but through this process, we were equipped with the tools to really embed a gender approach in our investment activities. And it was really this IW experience which led to the genesis of this new fund that we're launching, the Beacon Fund. And it allowed us to look at familiar problems with new eyes and new tangible experience. I'm sure most of you in the room today will be familiar with the challenge outlined on this slide, which is that essentially, the number of women starting businesses in Southeast Asia is relatively high, but many struggle with access to capital. And through our work with Investing in Women, and as we mapped out our investment process and really tried to understand where gender plays a role, we became acutely aware about a set of issues, which you can see on the left-hand side of this slide. We observed things like conscious and unconscious bias. We saw that often investor networks were less accessible to women, and we were also very aware of the overarching gender norms in the countries where we invest. And these are very real issues, and we got started on changing our investment process to take them into account. So, for example, thinking through ways in which we could make ourselves more accessible to female entrepreneurs, or create specific forums within our team to discuss the insights from our gender analysis and challenge any internal biases that we might have had. But I think part of us still felt a little unsatisfied that they told the whole story around this gender financing gap that we were seeing in Southeast Asia. And I remember clearly this aha moment that we had one day when we realized that we were meeting with a lot of companies which were actually cash flow positive and growing strongly, but we couldn't actually invest in them because they didn't show that explosive growth trajectory, which is typically demanded by venture capital. And as part of the IW fund, I mean, that was also set up more as a VC fund, which had been our bread and butter up till now, and it's really predicated upon achieving these home runs, right? These companies which can achieve 10x, 20x type of returns. And as we looked around, we realized, it wasn't just us, it was actually the broader market that we're in. Most of the private capital, at least in our markets, is concentrated in venture capital as well as private equity. And this is, of course, not to detract from the VC model. It's a very legitimate model, which, I think, as we've been hearing about, can yield great financial as well as social returns. And, of course, at Panama ourselves, I mean, we do manage VC funds as well. But it certainly has limitations in reaching some of these more moderate growth businesses, right, which remain severely underserved. One of the interesting pieces as well is that this is also true in the gender lens investing space as well, right? There's a strong concentration even amongst GLI funds, and this is from the Project Sage work, which Suzanne Beagle is leading. There's a strong concentration amongst VC and private equity, as well as tech and also US tech in particular. And that is essentially how we came to the concept of the Beacon Fund, right? Designing a fund which is really centered on these profitable moderate growth businesses, which are disproportionately run by women. And to do that effectively, we needed to pivot our investment instruments. We saw that debt could actually be a better fit for these businesses. These businesses are typically geared towards cash flow and have the capacity to make regular repayments. I think another piece here is that they may not necessarily be looking for an exit, right, which is a typical a necessary feature of the equity approach. And the third piece is that we're very much committed to applying a gender lens across our entire operations here, from what we're investing in, so women-led businesses and businesses which primarily and intentionally target women and girls, to also how we're investing, and really applying a gender analysis at every step of the investment process, and really thinking through the composition of the team, right, and shaping a team where the majority of investment decision makers are women. And the final piece that I'd like to highlight here is that, we actually realized the traditional venture capital structure here didn't really fit with the goals of Beacon. And as a result, we decided to set Beacon up as an evergreen fund rather than a fund with a typical 10-year fixed life as in traditional VC. And in doing so, we really wanted to orient the fund itself towards long-term capital appreciation and potentially kind of, near-term cash flows as well, through the payment of dividends from the evergreen fund structure. And we thought this made sense for the types of companies that we were backing and a predominantly debt focus in our investment instruments, and would also be of appeal to some investors who were looking for kind of that long-term capital appreciation, as well as the possibility to potentially redeem some of their investments over time. And finally, just looking back at kind of the journey so far, both at Patamaran as well as at Beacon specifically, I think we've seen that there's this real hunger in the market to create these alternative models of success, right, both in entrepreneurship as well as investing. I think the concept of moderate growth, more profit-oriented companies, versus companies which burn a lot of cash and constantly need to raise capital to thrive. That's really resonated with a lot of people, and I think some of you might have seen these interesting movements around Zebras Unite, right, for celebrating zebras versus unicorns, and also this concept of builder capital versus venture capital, which has been a really interesting development for our industry. The second piece is, I think we've heard it loud and clear on many of the sessions today that, the momentum around GLI is growing. We're seeing so many thoughtful and interesting VCs, which really go beyond, let's find some women-led businesses and invest in them. People are really appreciating, I think, some of the gaps and needs and opportunities as well, in this segment. And I think finally, I think maybe this is a call to action or encouragement here. I think it's really time to be bold, right? And I think, COVID and the associated downturn has a disproportionate effect on women and girls. And, I really hope that this is the time that we double down on GLI and not back away from it. And I think that's something the community that passionately feels about as well. So I think I'll wrap it up there, and happy to take any questions and then go deeper.
Thank you very much, Shuyan. That was really very insightful about gender lens investing. It's great to know that people are actually looking at that segment. I actually have a couple of questions for you. So I'm going to start with the first one, which is, how have you been going about finding these deals? How do you fill your pipeline? And do you find there are opportunities fitting the profile that you've described?
Right, thanks. It's definitely a perennial question of, is there enough pipeline to support this particular, investment thesis? And I think, we've absolutely seen that there's a very robust pipeline here. I think particularly when we broaden our scope to include companies which go beyond the typical or traditional VC profile. I think we would acknowledge that, those which fit the VC profile are very exciting, but they're probably a pretty small subset of companies out there, right? And that probably the majority of companies are more in this, moderate growth, oriented towards, cash flow and profitability type of bucket. And I think indeed, as we go around our focus countries of Vietnam, Indonesia, and the Philippines, we've found that there are many moderate-sized companies, even doing some few $1 million of revenue, which find it difficult to get the capital that they need, right? They could potentially get some short-term credit lines from banks, but medium-term loans for the CapEx investments or equipment, et cetera, may be limited for them. And I think another interesting piece is that we've really noted that very few lenders in our markets who are underwriting based on actual cash flows or potential cash flows versus simply the availability of collateral. So we think there's a very interesting kind of segment to be captured here.
I see. Is that why there's this is bent towards debt funding as opposed to equity?
Yeah, I think so, right? I mean, so I think when, because we're focusing on these cash flow businesses, I mean, I think debt funding can often make a lot more sense. And I think the big piece that we realized around equity financing is that, obviously implies an exit, right? And there's a decent number of entrepreneurs who simply don't see that as a key goal for them. And as a result, equity investment wouldn't make sense. Alternatively, we see that the growth trajectory of that business might not support a strong exit thesis or an exit within a particular time frame, right? So I think, as you would know, 5 to 7 years is typically what we would be looking for in terms of an exit time frame. But I think there's many businesses out there which that doesn't make sense.
Right. So I mean, in terms of you talked about debt funding and helping. But what else do you do? What other ways do you support these companies? Because clearly, capital itself is not going to really push the agenda of impact progress. So what else do you guys do to support them?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. And I think I think in some ways we're kind of, we're historically been equity investors, now taking more of a lending role, right? So I think we're taking some of the principles of equity investing, which as I think everyone on this call knows, is really around kind of long-term partnership and a broader support base and a kind of advisory role, right, versus a lender, right, which is just giving the money and then making sure it gets paid back. So I think we're taking a lot of the ethos from our equity investing to our debt investments as well. And I think a really important component of the Beacon Fund is really creating a community of these kinds of businesses, right, which are embracing a somewhat different model from the type celebrated in venture capital, and creating a community and network to really share ideas on this segment and how do we grow it sustainably.
I see. That's interesting. And how has COVID, can you give us some examples how COVID has actually impacted your ability to both source these deals and actually even find inroads into the communities, given where you are? I mean, how do you go about looking for these deals given our challenging travel restrictions and everything?
Well, it's an interesting question. I mean, so I'm sitting here in Ho Chi Minh City in Vietnam, and actually things are pretty much back to normal within our borders. I've caught four domestic flights since COVID, which might be surprising. But I think definitely, as with everyone, COVID-19 has given us good pause for thought, right, about our strategy. I think most importantly, I think it's given us more conviction, right, to double down and pursue this investment thesis, because we see the contraction and the impact on credit availability potentially being more severe for women-led businesses, and we want to be part of the solution here. I think the other area where we're very lucky is we have a very supportive anchor investor who is fully committed, right? And I think obviously in this period, fundraising is not as easy as maybe it was this time last year. But I think from a fundraising perspective, we're lucky to have kind of the full support of a set of anchor investors and supporters, right, including investing in women as well as USAID. So I think in terms of actual strategy and deployment, we may be looking at slightly smaller ticket sizes to accommodate kind of the different needs and growth trajectories of businesses during this time. But I think still finding some really interesting and resilient businesses despite the COVID-19 effect.
So tell us, what kind of quantum are you looking at to invest in these businesses?
Right. I mean, I think our initial thesis was around $500,000 to $2 million. I think, as mentioned, we might be looking at a bit smaller than that, because of the current economic environment. That's the kind of rough quantum.
Okay. And in terms of, when you're talking about women empowerment and gender lens investing and making sure that you keep this really focus on making sure gender analysis throughout each stage, tell me, how do you then see how do you deal with the value chain of doing the deals?
So, how do we really think about embedding that approach across our entire process?
Exactly, the whole value chain, because you're going through it all. So how do you look at value chain in terms of helping you to achieve the goal of making sure that women are empowered, giving them the opportunities and helping them develop? Yeah,
I think this has been a really important part of what we've been building out over the past 3 years, through the Investing in Women program. And I think this is kind of our passion, the gender analysis part, particularly around the value chain. And I think what we ultimately realized is there's no like one checklist where you can ask these questions and then you know everything you need to know about say the value chain or the business model, right, and how gender plays a role. So we've really instead developed some conversation starters, which our investment team uses to really prompt these conversations around gender with the entrepreneurs and other we talk to. And have also set up some very defined checkpoints within our investment process to have these discussions and actually make people think about what are the implications versus saying like is gender a factor here, yes or no. So really glad to have moved in the direction of kind of really valuing the role that women play versus just ticking a box.
Okay, thank you very much, Shuyin. There were lots more questions, but we really have run out of time. So I really like to thank you for your insights and for sharing more about the Beacon Fund and what you're doing. And at this point, I'm going to have to hand it back over to the AVPN team.
Thank you, Genevieve. We've come to the end of our session. Thank you to the panelists as well, Ralitza, Venkat, Tom, and Shuyin. This session is made possible with the kind support of our lead partner, Chandler Foundation, Stockholm Environment Institute, and Udan Price Foundation, our knowledge partner, the Ford Foundation, and Sasakawa Peace Foundation, and our impact partner for this session was Investing in Women, whose support is made possible through the Australian Department for Foreign Affairs and Trade. Do share your highlights of this session on social media and remember to tag us using the hashtag AVPN2020. Starting next is the session on promoting gender and inclusive development through innovations in health financing. Before you leave us today, we would like you to participate in a quick survey to share with us any feedback you might have on this session. And please continue chatting with your speakers and fellow delegates in this session. Make full use of the AVPN connector. The link can be found in the resource section. In this section, you'll also find the link to our new gender platform. This is where you can identify synergies with our members to scale gender equality, connect with women-led enterprises and deals, and support women and girls, and share your blogs, case studies, and success stories. Thank you very much, and goodbye from the team at AVPN.